Hey, guys, you guys should change your names on your thing, like Dr. Moss,
Okay,
Dr.
we are live.
Yeah.
All right, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Benicia Unified May 7th School Board meeting. Once again, we are on a virtual meeting, so we are live on YouTube, everyone. Okay, I'd like to start with requesting that everybody stand and join me in the pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, we do not have any highlights tonight, so the first thing I'm going to do is request a motion to approve the agenda as presented for this evening.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
And Gethsemane and Ms. Dr. Moss will approve it. Will second it. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the agenda will pass. Okay, moving on to reports, Dr. Young.
Hi, thank you very much. Good evening, trustees and everybody out there and team that we'll hear from later on in the presentation. And anybody who's able to tune in and watch us this evening, welcome. This is our third board meeting using this virtual platform. And the last two meetings I thought went well and the technology worked well. And we moved through all the items at a pretty good pace. So hopefully we'll be on course tonight. I want to start off just by thanking everybody for their hard work during this challenging time, and to recognize also this is Teacher Appreciation Week, and just to put that out there that we love our teachers and acknowledging them in different ways, and just praising their efforts for taking on an entirely new platform in a very short period of time and really making it work for our kids. And we'll hear more details about that later this evening from Dr. Beetson. So wanted to thank all of our teachers. And also, I forget if it was Wednesday or Thursday, but I think it was National Nurse Appreciation Day, correct, Dr. Gill?
Yes.
And so we appreciated our amazing nurse, Miss Terry Dean. She was truly incredible. So those two groups of people we want to thank for their hard work. And then just a quick comment from me. I was thinking about, all of our focus on distance learning and the good work that we're doing on behalf of our kids and how the staff has been wonderful. And then also to let the public know that while that's going on, the rest of the departments continue to do their work with much gratitude and doing excellent work, from curriculum and instruction to keeping all of that system moving forward, taking us through this year and beginning to think about next year, to the special ed task force, which did amazing work during the course of the year. And we'll hear from them later in the year about the ideas about those services moving into next year. Recognizing the fact that we continue to do the work on the LCAP, which is the Local Control Accountability Plan, but it also functions as our district strategic plan. So lots of work taking place there, tons of work coming out of HR as we continue to look at the positions that we may or may not be able to fill going forward. So we appreciate that work. And food services, we recognize Miss Courtney and her team in the past have just been incredible and feeding upwards 450 kids a day, 450 families a day, breakfast and a lunch in 3 different locations. So just tremendous work from them. Our tech department has been wonderful. They continue to support all of this work with distance learning. Our business department is continuing to make sure all of that's running. We've got some bond work taking place. So just so the public knows, all the other parts of the system where it's not as visible we're in our brick and mortar platform, work is continuing. So just want everybody to know that. We're also in a place now, and even if we weren't dealing with this tremendous challenge with the COVID-19, that we're thinking about where we are now in this course of the year with about 5 weeks of school left, and reflecting on that good work. And we're starting to turn our gaze, our lens, our thoughts and work towards what next year could look like. So we are beginning some scenario planning around that. I'd like to make a comment for the public, for those who have tuned into this, that I put a clarification statement out from State Superintendent of Schools, Tony Thurman, clarifying a comment that the governor made. It was sort of an off-the-cuff comment about the possibility of school starting in July. So I put that clarification out, and I just want to let the public know, again, no decisions have been made around that yet at all. There's a ton of planning that needs to take place regarding what school will look like in the fall and when that will start. So more news to come around that, but I just wanted to clarify that again. And maybe in closing from me, some of the other news that we're getting is, really some financial news that is we're really going to have to wrestle with as all districts and businesses and individuals throughout California. The budget landscape has been hit really hard by this. So there's some issues with that, definitely for Benicia and other school districts that we're going to have to really take a strong look at as we plan going forward. So overall, lots of great work taking place for our kids. We continue to reflect on it and to finish this year strong and keep asking ourselves, what can we learn to get even better, and then start turning our lens towards the beginning of next school year. And dear parents, dear kids, thanks for hanging in there. Thanks staff. Thanks everybody for making the best out of a situation that we know isn't ideal, but what I think is become the Benicia way, which is, roll up your sleeves, get ahead of it and get after it and do it with a lot of integrity and a lot of love and a lot of commitment for our students. So that's it for me.
All right, thank you. All right, any of my colleagues have any reports that they would like to share out? No? Well, I'm just going to share out, and I was with a lot of you guys. We actually got to enjoy the Benicia High School Seniors Parade, the drive-through. Yeah. That was a pretty amazing event, along with the Benicia Middle School that we were at this past week. So it's kind of fun to see the kids. They were real excited. Yeah, Mark was there. He was giving out the cookies while I was giving out the signs. The kids were really excited. Parents were excited. It was fun to see the energy of the staff and the kids and the parents that day. So kudos to our schools for doing that for the kids and allowing them some new events in order to replace the traditions that they have in fact had to change. I also sat in on the curriculum meeting with Dr. Beatson, and that's all I'm going to say because she's got lots of news for us. Because last time I gave her a report, she said I stole her thunder. So also, safe routes to school. I got a message last night. They had their county level meeting. So all of the requests that we put in for school crossings, additional protections at each of the schools, except for Matthew Turner, were in fact approved. So hopefully we'll start seeing some of that work going on this summer. And I've also requested to Dr. Young to put it into our new, is he safety coordinator? Is that Mr.
Yeah,
Tucker?
that's correct. Yes.
To actually officially put in a request for that one Matthew Turner crossing where we had the accident at the beginning of the year. So that in fact will then address all of our schools and all of the crossings out of our schools. So then I think we will be in a really good position at that point. But I want to say thank you to Safe Routes. They have funded, all of our other requests. So I'm appreciative of that. Okay, so with that said, if there's no other comments from anyone, I'm going to move on to the public comment section. So members of the public may submit comments on items on the agendas and any item within the jurisdiction of the school district in the following manner for meetings during the shelter-in-place executive order: via a school forum on the link that will be open during the public from 6 to 7 p.m. on the day of the meeting. The governing board allows speakers to speak at regular meetings on agendized and not agendized matters under public comment. Comments are limited to no more than 3 minutes per speaker. By law, no action may be taken on any item raised during the public comment period, and matters may be referred to staff for placement on a future agenda of the governing board. So with that said, I have about 8, and I will be reading them to you this evening so that they can in fact be put into public record. So the first one is from Emily Bowe of 646 Snapdragon Place. We would like to know why Benicia Unified has done nothing to change the grading policy for students. Surrounding districts have switched to pass-fail grading, allowing students to only improve their grades from the third quarter and not allowing them to drop, or allowing students to choose between a pass-fail or the previous grading system. BUSD is neglecting its students during a global pandemic. Many students have distracting home lives, home work responsibilities, pre-existing health conditions, and learning disorders that are exacerbated by working for hours on end staring at a screen. BUSD's adjustments have been to tell teachers to give out less work and grade compassionately, but this is not a policy. It's completely subjective. It's not fair to make teachers adjust for grading by still relying on the same policy as before, because they have no actual definition of what any of this means. It's incredibly vague. We need an actual guarantee that students will not end up failing or have their grades drop significantly during this pandemic. Without access to in-class learning, a lot of us are suffering. We're not able to stare at a screen all day, but we have to. As seniors, many of us fear colleges may rescind their acceptances. With BHS's current grading policy, we are not able to adjust during a global pandemic. We are left to fail. This jeopardizes our future and adds unnecessary stress to children who are already going through a very traumatic event. We fail to see how Benicia High School is being emphatic to our circumstances, and if you choose to ignore them. It's very disheartening that students have been left completely out of the decision process of how to grade in a time of crisis. And we would like you to listen to us when we say your current system isn't working. Nobody should lose their seat in college due to the grades they received during a global pandemic. There have been 25 students who have been included in this email to the board and to Dr. Charles Young about this system not working for them. We've asked you not to brush us off, but you've indicated through answers to our email that you're going to do just that. We ask you to think about the students over your image. We don't understand BUSC's incentive for not changing a policy that is hurting so many students. Comment number two.
Diane?
Yeah.
So as we're going through reading these, is it appropriate to ask questions? Because I have a question for either Leslie or Charles.
Making any comment on the the only questions we can ask would be to Dr. Young to ask his staff.
Yes.
But not directly to the.
Yes. So
okay,
in that case, I have a question for Charles.
Okay.
And Charles, it was my understanding that we had 2 school work days where the faculty were designing their standards for each grade level. Is that correct?
Yeah, Dr. Beetzer will talk about that process. Yeah, but part of the process early on was that we identified essential standards by grade level and by course offering. And we did that very quickly in response to the fact that we had sort of 2 closure phases. The first one was we were going to close for a short period of time, and then we found out we had to close for the rest of the year. And when that happened, I think it was around 2.5 months of school left, approximately. So so that we did do that. It was a focused effort on identifying those essential standards. Yeah.
Excellent. And Leslie presented that discussion before, and you'll go into it. Okay, yep. Thank you.
Okay. Comment number 2 is from Mrs. Leanne Tagapera. It says, please consider my comments on agenda item number 12 regarding grading policy for tonight's meeting and read them into the record. I would also like to enter into the record that the attached summary of my research of other district grading policies, which I am not asking that you read out loud, but include in the record. Again, parents should be considered partners with the district in their children's education. I implore you to consider outreach to and the involvement of district parents and students in the future and on such important issues. There are 2 documents that multiple pages here that we said that we would announce and that we would include into the public record. And they are involving the district grading policy summary as long as with the other summaries from other districts. Okay.
Yep.
Comment number 3 is from Olivia Newcomb. As a high school senior, I am concerned with the current grading policy during this time. It is overwhelming to keep up with assignments without in-class learning, and I suggest we switch this quarter to a similar system that other districts have put in place. I would recommend switching to a system that ensures students cannot fall below third quarter grades with a chance to improve. This reflects the genuine merit of the students and what they can and have accomplished. I understand that this current situation is difficult to navigate, but I hope you understand and hear our struggles. Comment number 4 is from Charlotte, Austria, and again, it's on the grading. I fully support moving towards a more accommodating grading system for the drastic change in learning and online schooling, rather than keeping the same grading system that we had before school shut down. I don't believe it's reasonable to hold students to the same standards as in-person classes when it gives significantly less time for teachers to discuss and teach content directly to students. And every student will be working in different environments that may hinder them from learning new content from multiple classes every day at the same rate as normal school. Although some teachers are flexible, talking to teachers alone isn't a guarantee that every student is safe from failing or having grades drop because of things they can't control. Switching to a more flexible grading system that takes all of these factors into account, such as keeping grades from dropping below what the grade was before the shutdown, would let students know that the school board truly understands what we are going through in such uncertain times. And it would take an immense amount of unnecessary stress off of our shoulders. Thank you for your time and for your attention.
Can I ask a question just for clarification?
Yes.
Dr. Young, the communication went out to students after, after the process was kind of going in terms of school closure? Was it something sent directly to students, or how did that communication go? Or can you talk about that or speak on that?
Charles, are you hearing us?
He's on mute. If
Oh,
he's
there you go.
talking.
Oh, there we go.
I don't know, Dr. Beetson, if you want to chime in on this one. I think the communication out to students would come from the site administration, and from their teachers.
Right. So we Dr. Young sent out communication to families, and then the direct student communication would have come from sites at the secondary level, teachers at the elementary level.
Right. And then Dr. Moss, thank you, Dr. Beetson. When one of the documents that we sent out, the learning plan was sent out to all users and posted on social media, etc.
Okay. All right. Thank you for clarification.
Sure.
Okay. Comment
Did the
number
learning
5.
plan, I'm sorry,
I'm sorry,
the
go ahead.
reference. Did the learning plan include reference to students and families could work directly with their teachers if they had concerns about grade issues? Because in our grading policy, we have the flexibility to adjust grades when students have concerns. And so the student comments we're hearing have a high level of concern. And I'm just wondering if they have shared that concern with their teachers and their site administrators, or if this is more an overall discussion about the idea of grading.
Well, and my question is also just to dovetail on what you're asking as well, is were they informed or aware of the fact that they could do that?
I have a thought. Do you want to go through the comments and then keep those notes, and then when we get to the full presentation from?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So all of these comments are about the distance learning and the grading. So I have 3 more.
Okay.
So number 5 is from Mrs. June Knickerbocker McDonald. It says, "Dear board members, please consider adopting a distance learning grading policy at Benicia Unified School District. My vote is for using the better of the 3rd and 4th quarter grades. This policy will allow every student to succeed. I have lived in Benicia for over 30 years and know many families here. I know that there are many more students struggling with distance learning than thriving. It may be just one class, all 6, or anything in between. But the fact is, many students are not getting the kind of grades they are used to earning in every class. They certainly aren't getting the education they're used to getting. It's unconscionable to punish children who are struggling with distance learning by using a grading policy that was not designed for this. It may not bother a parent if their child goes from A's to B's or B's to C's, but I guarantee you it bothers the students. Our students, especially the high achievers, identify themselves by their grades. If a grade goes down a notch or two, it does affect self-esteem for many of these children. We also have some teachers in every school who are following the recommendations of CDE rather than BUSD, and some who are following the current BUSD grading policy instead of CDE. This is unfair to everyone. We already have a higher number of anxious teenagers than at any other time in history. This increase in anxiety has been scientifically linked to the widespread use of electronics. And here we are, forcing our children to spend many more hours every day on the very electronics that have hurt them in the first place. Anxiety levels among our children are even higher now than when they were in the classroom. Of course, that will affect their mental health and their academic performance. That is why the cities all around Benicia and all over the state and all over the country have adopted distance learning grading policies. In order to keep the morale of our students up, BUSD must do the same. Otherwise, you are putting our students at a disadvantage. If BUSD were to allow all teachers to give the better of third or fourth quarter grades to every school student, then every student has the chance to do their best. I urge you to poll every student, parent, and teacher. Compare the third quarter grades to the fourth quarter grades for every student whose teacher refuses to hold them at no lower than the third quarter. I've read in the news that BUSD has gotten feedback from parents and students already. No one has asked me or my students, my friends, or my neighbors and their students. I want every vote counted, and I want my vote counted. Number 6 is from Giovanna Zampa, and she is from Willow Court in Benicia. I would like to encourage the Benicia Unified School Board to adopt a new grading policy to better serve their students as other districts have done. I encourage Benicia Unified to adopt a grading system similar to San Jose Unified and Vallejo Unified, so that students can only improve and not fail below the grades that we have earned before the school closure. This system would enable students to seek the help we need without fear of failing classes we have worked hard all year to get good grades in. This is especially a concern for our seniors. If we fail a class, it doesn't just mean that we have to retake another class. If we fail a class, colleges can rescind their acceptances. If not just a class for us, it is for our future at stake. Many students, especially in our high schools, have many duties to attend to outside of school. While we may no longer have extracurricular activities that take up our time, many of us have extra responsibilities at home. We have younger siblings to take care of and grandparents in need of extra help. Many kids have to serve as a tutor to their younger siblings in addition to keeping up with their own schoolwork. Other kids work part-time or full-time as essential workers. In addition to extra duties at home, the hours of screen time and inactivity every day have been taking a toll on our health. Many of my friends and I have noted that we end each day with a migraine from the hours we spend on the computer from schoolwork. By changing the BUSD grading policy to be more compassionate to students' needs during this time, we would be relieved of some of our stress about balancing schoolwork, home responsibilities, work, and future plans. You claim you will do all you can to support us, so prove it. During this unprecedented time of recession and global pandemic, we need change, and we need it now. Our schools have changed their grading policy weeks ago. Why haven't you? Number 7 is from Lauren Sluga. Lauren is a teacher in our district. I am writing a letter to let you know how proud I am to teach in the district that has handled distance learning so well. By starting on March 17th, our students were able to keep up with their studies. By setting up Google Classroom, PowerSchool parent emails, and Zoom, I have been able to connect with my students and parents and teach to the best of my ability under these circumstances. BUSD was able to provide devices for students in a timely fashion, and BMS was even able to provide multiple devices to households with multiple students. Lindsay Dolsky has asked text immediately and provided support through emails and Zoom staff meetings. Faith Shaw, Connie Huntington, and Lindsay even delivered a personalized BMSD teacher appreciation gift for all of us out-of-towners. My students have been wonderful in completing their work with quality and corresponding by email and Zoom meetings. I gave a history mystery just for fun and bragging rights, and 31 students submitted their guesses in just one day. My one concern is rumblings that a few parents do not want letter grades, but a pass-fail grading system, or just having the third quarter become the semester grade. This does not acknowledge the hard work of most of my students. I have not given any tests, so they are only being graded on their assignments. A summary of my students' current grades are A's 60%, B's 20%, C's 8%, D 5s, and 7% are F's. Most of my students' grades that say consistent or improved, and those earning D's and F's are the same students who grades when school was in classroom and is due to missing work. Interestingly, most of my students with chronic absences have greatly improved their grades. For communication, I have sent a weekly email to parents, made individual emails and phone calls to parents and students with missing work. I am afraid that the secondary students are doing their work will not be motivated to complete their work with quality if the district were to change the grading system. I have had quite a few emails from parents appreciative of the curriculum I am still delivering to my students, but the voices I listen to the most is that of my students. In an anonymous student survey, my students overwhelmingly said that what I am doing is working for them. They miss being in class, but have expressed that school is the one part of their life that seems close to normal. Please don't send the message to them that what they are doing doesn't matter. I appreciate that I was able to share my views with Dr. Young during our 8th grade promotion sign distribution last Friday, and now I want to share my perspective with you. Thank you, sincerely, Lauren Sluga, BMS teacher. And the last comment is from June McDonald, and I believe I read this comment. This is the email, I think. She submitted it both ways, so I am going to pass on the second copy of the same comment. Becky, if you give me 1 second, I'm just going to verify that. Yes. No, it's not the same comment, so I'm going to read it. This is June McDonald. I have a Benicia High School senior who is struggling with online learning. She has ADHD and anxiety and is under the care of a psychiatrist and a therapist, and has been experiencing deterioration in her mental health since school closure. Her academic standing has suffered greatly. I have reached out to the school counselor, all of her teachers, and the principal. I've asked if they could drop the 4 classes not needed for graduation so that my daughter can focus on AP Government and AP Lit and still graduate. As other options, I asked that she be graded credit, no credit, or set up with an IEP. I got a lengthy email back from the principal explaining that the BUSD grading policy is not being changed for distance learning with no mention of setting up an IEP. It has already been recommended to me by the doctors and educators I have spoken with that it would be to the best interest of my daughter to preserve her mental health and focus only on the 2 AP classes she needs to graduate with. However, that means her GPA is severely damaged. I know that other school districts all over the state of California, and indeed the country, have adapted their grading policies to accommodate distance learning challenges. If we lived in Vallejo, Fairfield, Contra Costa, Napa, or Sonoma, etc., my daughter's GPA would not be impacted as it is here in Benicia. I've also learned that the principal at Benicia High School has emailed the marching band families to let them know their 3rd quarter band grades will be used for their semester band grade. I do not understand how the principal, our school district, and our school board can justify providing blanket grade accommodations for band students and deny an at-risk student the same accommodation. My Benicia High School students have sculpture, ceramics, and automotive between them, which provides valuable creative hands-on learning experiences. Now, not only are these creative outlets gone, but they're being asked to do written assignments for these classes. This adds more stress to an already stressful situation. And what about color guard? My daughter's girlfriend is in color guard, and they were not included in the band accommodation. Color guard marches with the band. And what about all the other teachers? Do you consider this fair treatment to all of them? I know that some children have adapted more readily to distance learning. My son fits that description. However, I think it's important not to punish those who do not learn well with electronic assignments, emails, and periodic check-ins and no actual teaching. My daughter did not choose to be a distant learner and should not be punished because she can't perform up to her normal standards during a global pandemic. Both of my children would gladly approve of using the higher of their third or fourth quarter grades. And that is the last of the comments that I have. At this point, I'm going to ask us to go on to the agenda and back to the consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered by the board to be routine and will be approved by the board in one motion. There will be no discussion on these items unless the members of the board, staff, or public request items to be pulled. So with that, I just want to mention that within that is the minutes and also the personnel action list, which has been amended. So we are making that approval by the amended PAL list. So do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of accepting the consent calendar, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the consent calendar is approved. Okay, now
We
we're
have two gifts.
discussion item. I'm sorry, Stace.
We do have two gifts to respond to.
Okay.
We're very thankful to the Valero refinery for $4,000 worth of gift cards, gas gift cards. There were 80 of them. And I believe Dr. Young said at our last meeting, those were distributed to essential workers to help support their transportation to and from work. We also had a wonderful gift from First Baptist Church of Benicia, who paid off all students' negative balances for the lunch program. And that was a total of $2,085. So we thank both of those community organizations for their support.
Wow, amazing. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to our discussion items, which is number 12. So 12.1 is going to be Dr. Beetson, and it's going to be an update and discussion on the distance learning, including feedback, engagement, and grading. So Dr. Beetson?
Sure. And if you don't mind, I'll sort of just a couple of comments, Dr. Beetson, before I turn it over to you. That the trustees and the staff and I appreciate the student and parent and teacher comments. Thank you that were read into the record. And just a couple of comments about distance learning that we were one of the first districts to be responsive of it. We're a lot of very talented people. I guess we sort of anticipated this was coming at us, so we had a rapid response. We had instruction going on as I believe on just about day one. We were getting after it with the kids, getting Chromebooks out to everybody. Fortunately, we are one-to-one at the high school, so that helped. As it was asked earlier, we identified essential standards early on to narrow that focus, so it wasn't overwhelming for folks. I think the other part that was really key for us is a strong partnership with the Teachers Association. That relationship is critical all the time, and in particular when adopting this new model. So we partnered with the design of the model and the implementation of it right from the beginning, which included writing something called an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, to the negotiated agreement. We were able to write one of those, two of them, very, very quickly, which defined the work, what it looks like, and how we can band together in a partnership to support our students. So we're very proud of that partnership with the Teachers Union. And then also we recognize, none of this is ideal. We know that districts throughout the nation are struggling with distance learning and trying to make the right decisions for kids. And districts have made lots of different decisions about grading, lots of different ways of taking a look at it. So our best interest when we were taking a look very carefully at guidance documents, talking to other superintendents, collaborating with one another, informing and checking in with the board, we made the decision obviously with the best interest of our students in mind to support their learning. Because when we closed school, we had a whole lot of school left, like I think 2.5 months. So that being said, as we said from the beginning, we continue to reflect on what we do, to reflect and to refine and continue to make it a good model for the students and for staff. So that's what we're about tonight. This is our second presentation from the Curriculum and Instruction Department to give us an update on the distance learning model in general and specific grading, because that was it's been a request that we give some more specifics around that. So we appreciate hearing from you tonight, Dr. Beatson and Ms. Rice. So welcome.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Young. I'm going to actually turn the first part of the presentation over to Mrs. Rice, Coordinator of Education Services, who's going to do an update on some highlights and kind of get you a peek into what's actually happening during distance learning.
All right, can you see my screen that I'm sharing?
Yes, yes.
Okay, sorry, just want to make sure you can hear me. All right, so I am going to give you an update on where we are with distance learning. And I just want to reiterate that all of our planning for distance learning, all the work that we're doing, still keeps the heart of our vision of what we want for our students. And again, that's where all students achieve at their highest potential in an engaging, inspiring, and challenging learning environment. And with that said, I just want to highlight some of the areas that teachers have been working really hard to find new ways to engage our students in this unprecedented time of learning. And our teachers, I just want to say, thank you, and we appreciate you, especially in Teacher Appreciation Week. But there's many different creative ways that they've come up with supporting our students, and I'm just going to share and highlight a few. Some of our teachers, this happens to be a first grade teacher. She is translating her materials, it should pop up in just a second, into the native language of her student. With that said, she is providing the materials in English because that's important to support our English learners, but is having the directions in the child's native language to also support that child as well as the family that speaks that native language. And then we also have different videos that the teachers are making. So different things are happening to create a distance learning environment. Some teachers are teaching live. Some teachers have found that presenting a video first and then having open class time to discuss things is really working. And this happens to be a third grade teacher, Miss Carnes. And I'm just going to play a snippet of what she's done so far.
She's on mute.
She is?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Get ready for next year.
There you go.
The video will be divided up into parts, which will be the steps on how to write that informational book. So you can use this video at your own pace. If you'd like to complete one step on one day and then continue your session tomorrow or the next day, that's totally fine. Or if you really feel like you're on a roll one day and you'd like to do more than one step at once in one session or in one day, that's awesome too. You can watch the video the whole way straight through to get the main ideas of how to write an informational book, and then
I'm going to speed forward a little bit just to show you some of the examples. So we get the gist there, but what Ms. Carnes does is she puts out videos to her students, and several teachers are doing this as well, that breaks down the lessons into components. As she highlighted, she let the students know that they can break it up into chunks or days, or if they're on a roll in writing, they can continue on, and there's that guide. And then she opens up certain check-in hours that the kids can get individualized support. Also, we have things such as book clubs still going on. This is a 5th grade teacher that puts out what we call would be book tasting. So if this was happening live in classes, we'd have books sitting out. Kids would fish through and they would come up with little summary pieces so that they basically book shop. So what this teacher did was took the different summaries to give the kids an overview, and this happens to be their fantasy unit in 5th grade in Reader's Workshop. So the students go ahead and do their book tasting virtually so that they can pick their books, and then they work in their book groups to still do their Reader's Workshop essential standards focus. And then we also have grade levels teaming up. We have what is called a Google Classroom collaboration site that we set up, and teachers are dropping some of the work that they're doing in there so that they could share across the district, and that's starting to pick up, and that's exciting. We have different teachers that have updated their syllabuses, explaining the expectations for these essential standards, from now until the end of the year. In high school, this was a video put out by Mr. Greenwood. He teaches English. I'm going to just show you a couple little snippets so you can see some of the creativity happening. This was his very first video he put out, explaining kind of the remote learning process and really just trying to get in touch with his students. And I think if you know high school, you'll appreciate this sentiment.
G1 remote.
Can you hear it?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
All right, y'all. Don't sit around too much. Get the blood pumping, get the heart pumping. It's good for the mind, body, and soul. Do some burpees. Bye. Got me something? Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money. Dollar bill, y'all. CREAM. Cash rules everything around me. What about reams? WREEMS. Gotta write every day, read every day, eat healthy, exercise, meditate, and sleep, y'all. I just finished up a 7-mile run. Meditated this morning.
I'm going to fast forward so you can.
Hello, Padawan. All right, I do expect you to do some work. All right, so English 11. We're going to be working with Richard Wright's Black Boy. English 10. You're going to continue with.
So you get the gist of how some of our teachers are reaching out and really trying to make that connection and to engage the students to want to connect in this virtual atmosphere. And they're really putting in some effort in how they are connecting with their kids, even in this distance land. And so Mr. Greenwood has also, put on some other teaching points along the way that the kids are continuously working. And then he has his office hours open to support the students as well. We have, I've also added on here for your video pleasure, some middle school video teachings of just some different styles that are going on out there as well. Also with VAPA or our electives, this happens to be a middle school project. And the students were doing art interpretation. And what they had to do was use things from their house. And so they responded to their art piece. They wrote about how it made them feel, what style or period this piece was from. They looked at the art piece, and then they recreated the art piece. So that is actually the students. And they took a picture and they then uploaded it into Google Classroom. So it's just amazing what our kids are able to do and what of our teachers have adapted in this virtual learning. Besides, the teaching from the classroom teacher, I shared with you last time some of the forward thinking that we were going to start working on, and that was how do we support our struggling students. And our elementary intervention specialists have now started serving some of the students that they identified as needing some extra support before we went out. And they are using Read Naturally Live. They're doing guided reading groups with literacy footprints, and they're running these virtual, intervention supports to give them that extra boost that they need. So that's going well so far. We also have our counselors at BHS, LHS, and BMS who now are offering a counseling corner. They sent out information to the students as well as parents. I received it as having a middle schooler and high schooler myself, offering some one-on-one counseling. They're doing some small group support groups, or just even kind of hang out to chat and connect. BHS is also offering access still to being college and career ready, and they're offering things such as connecting you with the community colleges for courses that are being offered in the summer. So they're still keeping that connection with the student even in this distance land. Also at BHS, we have the BSU, the Black Student Union, and they're still running their meetings virtually. Mr. Rogers, vice principal at the high school, leads the charge with that team, and they've been meeting regularly as well. And then also, with our distance learning, we've been providing continuous communication, as Dr. Young and Dr. Beatson spoke about earlier. There's a lot of communication coming from just the teacher themselves. A lot is posted in Google Classroom, and we have also sent out our distance learning plan through Dr. Young's communication to the entire district. In that communication, we let the parents know that they have the opportunity to request being a guardian in their child's Google Classroom. And what that allows you to do as a parent, and I'll see if I can pull that up here. Of course, I have to use my child as an example. Educator child is always the example or talked about. What it gives you is a daily summary for your student. It will tell you if there's some missing work or work that they need to communicate with their teacher, why it's late or when it's going to be turned in. It gives you the next few days as far as what the expectations are coming up. And then it also provides some of the videos that were done. This happens to be a video from my daughter's NGSS physics class on the rock cycle review. So it just gives me as a parent a glimpse of what she is managing. Okay. And then also in our distance learning highlights, there's a lot of planning going on, on how we're going to still recognize and celebrate our BUSD seniors as well as our 8th graders. You were just talking about going to those senior parades and 8th grade clap-offs, and we also have our 5th grade promotion in the works. So all of those things are still having a lot of focus and attention given to. And then this is also, Dr. Young talked about maybe they're not visible being in your child's Google Classroom, but all of the other departments are still going strong. And here's a picture on the right of our food services and some of our BUSD classified workers. I've read some of their thank you letters that they've received from families saying that coming to get their daily lunch is one of the highlights of their day, and keeping with that routine has been really important for the kids. And I just want to say the workers, if you've been to a site when they're giving it out, are just so positive. And they were striking their superhero pose there. And then as well as the picture to the left, that's teacher Chad Pound in his eagle costume, because LHS are the Eagles, and they did some deliveries to the homes of students to give them their yard signs and congratulate their seniors as well. And on the note of how we're engaging students, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Beatson, and she'll take this over.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, Stephanie, thank you, because it's really good to get a glimpse into what's happening in the classrooms. And we do have many, many reasons to celebrate as we continue to learn along this journey. None of us have ever done this sort of model before, and so it's important for us to continue to have the conversations. But we do have a lot of great things that are happening. And I want to reiterate one piece from what Dr. Young had said earlier on, is we're sort of in the fourth phase of this. So our first phase was that launch that we did back on March, I want to say it was the 13th, was that Friday, when late in the evening, I think we decided that we weren't going to be able to continue school as typical. And we thought we were going to be out for 2 weeks. That was our first information. And so our direction to staff was to use that time to do review and practice with the students. And we had those devices out very quickly and continue to respond as families express needs for those. Into that beginning of that second week, it was clear that we were going to be out. And I think the next piece was through the beginning of May, if I recall correctly. And so we knew that we really value learning and that school was still happening. And so we pulled our teachers for a couple of days and had them work in grade level teams and in course alikes, if you will, at the high school and middle school level to identify what is essential. And the frame we gave teachers was thinking, if at this point we still didn't know if we were going to be out for the rest of the year, but if we are truly out for the rest of the year, what is essential that our students leave our grade level or our course knowing? And then we actually took that information that they put together and brought it to the receiving grade level or course and said, can you look at this? Because we know we can't cover everything. We know school's going to look really different and feel really different. But if we can get kids to this place, can you pick up the pieces next year? And they said yes. And so that's how we sort of framed the work that was going to happen, the new instruction, if you will, through the end of the year, really focusing on, I always called it, if you're going to, a desert island or a stranded island and you can only take a few things, what are those few things that you need to take with you? And that's sort of the thinking behind those essential standards, because we didn't want to overwhelm people. Then the third phase came when we realized we were going to for sure be out for the rest of the year. And we started talking about instruction and what does instruction look like? And it looks different. And sometimes we use the word direct instruction. How do you teach in a virtual world? Sometimes it's videos like Stephanie just showed you. Sometimes it's a voiceover of a PowerPoint or written instructions or finding a video that is made by someone else that you can post. Sometimes instruction is in the inverse. Kids try something and then the teacher gives them very specific feedback, and that's how that learning grows. But the intent is really to think about what's the most important stuff that kids need to know and be able to do by the end of this current school year, and how do we provide that feedback and keep learning going? And now we're heading into that fourth phase, where we're going to continue to reflect and refine our practice, because as I said, this is new territory for everyone. And then we have to look to the future, because we don't know exactly what the fall is going to look like. We might be doing some more of this distance learning type of work. We might be in some sort of hybrid model. And so we wanted to make sure that we also set ourselves up to take that next step into whatever the fall or however long next year would continue, because that's our reality as of right now. So that said, we continue to monitor and reflect on our process for how do we provide meaningful feedback, grading, and levels of student engagement. And we set the goal through all of this, grading and feedback and engagement piece. The why behind what we're doing is we wanted to keep kids engaged through this last quarter of their school year with learning that's essential, and really focusing on those key standards. A worry that we had was if we took our foot off the brake, we'd have kids that would disengage. And we've heard from some of our surrounding districts that is in fact happened. And we know that that's happened somewhat here with us as well. But we also know, and I've been talking weekly, daily with our site leaders who are really trying to keep their finger on the pulse of what's happening, that the vast majority of our students are engaged at some level in their learning. And what I mean by that is they're doing some of the work, maybe not all of it, or they're really engaging in some classes and not in others. And so that I'll talk about a little bit later about what we're going to do about that piece. But based on our tracking of student data, we have between 95 and 97% of our students that are engaged at some level. So we have about 3 to 5% that we've been really struggling to get a hold of through this entire time. So we've been sending communication and we haven't been getting feedback back. If we can get kids engaged at some level, we can keep doing the work, the hard work of figuring out what we needed to support them as they move forward. So we've had a lot of conversation and hearing some great feedback about grading. And I wanted to just kind of articulate again how we came to the place of deciding to keep our current grading policy and then where we're moving at this point. We didn't take this charge lightly by any means. It was a big unknown. What's the right thing to do? What's the right thing to do for our students to keep them learning, to keep saying school's in session, what you do is valuable, what you do is important. So we had lots of conversation, both inside of our district with teachers and administrators. We talked with our surrounding counties. We talked with people in our county office of education to gather feedback. What is everyone doing? And our intent was to really promote consistency of instructional practice by giving lots of ongoing feedback and grading on what's essential content standards so that we could have that learning and growth continue. So right now, what we're currently doing is continuing our grading at the elementary by using the narrative portion of the report card and only on the essential standards. And then we're continuing our letter grading at secondary level. And I say that with flexibility. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that means. And some of I want to kind of share and remind folks about how we got to this decision-making process and the kinds of things we were thinking about. First, our current grading practice with so many other unknowns as we were heading into distance learning. What is it going to look like? Are the platforms going to work? Are kids going to have access? We made a decision to stay with what was already known, which is what does grading look like? So we had a system that people knew. We were worried if we switched at that moment to a credit, no credit, or a pass, fail, we didn't know what that looked like. And we started talking to people, what would that look like? Do we give a 0 and 100? We'd have to redefine a whole system and reteach a whole system. And we were worried that we'd have even more inconsistency by doing that. And then we also thought about the feedback and the messages that would send to our students. And we never wanted to send a message that credit, no credit, or pass, fail, or keeping with third quarter grades only, was that the year's done. And so we had a lot of conversation about if we stuck with, from the beginning, that third quarter grades would be your grade, you couldn't go lower than that, what incentive do kids have to keep working through fourth quarter? Because it essentially says nothing that we do in fourth quarter matters. We also didn't want to send the message that you can't do this. We want to support you through doing this. We're going to be as gentle as we can. We're going to make modifications, but we know that we can get through this hard thing together. I heard from another district that what they were struggling with, and feedback I saw was that, why should we bother doing anything in third quarter? Because I already got my third quarter grade and fourth quarter doesn't count. And so we didn't want to lose more kids, because if nothing else, that constant connection, that reason for doing something during the day was really important to us. And we wanted to honor the work that students are doing and that teachers are doing, and send a message that school isn't over and that learning still matters, especially on those key essential things. But all of that said, we continue to reflect. We continue to look at what other districts are doing. We know that there isn't a perfect system. I've done a lot of continued research even today as we were getting some feedback. And a lot of the districts that have gone to credit, no credit, or pass, fail are having people giving some very specific feedback about why that's not working for them. And so we're really trying to figure out what's that sweet spot and how do we continue to keep kids learning, keep them engaged and checking in with us, and be as gentle as possible, knowing that these are unprecedented times. So you might say, what does flexibility in instruction and grading and assessment look like? Because that's some of the vagueness, if you will, of the process that we've been using. So some of they're examples, because it's not always a one size fits all. We were worried if we went to a one size fits all, everybody's going to do this or this, that it would lock us into something that may not work for some families. So flexibility, what we've been talking with teachers about, use flexibility in your instruction, in your assessment, in your grading and feedback, to things like accept late work. Give full credit for late work. So don't do a 10% off, or 20% off, or 50% off. Assign work only on your essential standards. So really be choosy about what you're asking kids to do. Allow kids to do redos and makeups, and give feedback so that kids can improve if they don't do well on something. The other thing that we've really talked a lot about, and our principals are keeping, and I'll talk more about this later too, a lot of data on what kids are we not hearing from, and doing a lot of outreach, both at the teacher level and the administrators and the counselor levels, of calling. I just talked to one of our administrators today, and they make calls every single day trying to connect with parents and families to say, hey, we haven't seen or heard from Johnny in a while, what's going on? And really trying to keep connected with families. Earlier, we heard about the two unique exceptions that BHS ran up against with two courses that we did make an exception for in this grading policy, and that was marching band and iQuest. Marching band is an after-school class, and it is a compulsory course that's attached to the other band courses. So kids have to take marching band, and all of marching band is about the competitions and the performances, and there are none of those at this time. And so there was nothing for that band to go do. And so that is where that course ended at third quarter, and you got your third quarter grade. And the same is basically true for iQuest. iQuest is a 6-period class for students, seniors, to go and do internships. Well, right now they can't go out and do internships. And so that course also ended at the third quarter. It was very different than all of the other courses that don't look the same as when we're in school, but we're able to find meaningful work for students to do. And then the final piece in our thoughts and structure around keeping our current grading policy was this idea of needing to potentially use alternative structures to support students when they have extenuating circumstances. And so I know that teachers and administrators are putting the message out to families: if there is something happening in your household and you can't do this work or participate in this course, or you're struggling, reach out to us. Let us know, and we will work with you. And so our staff are constantly monitoring student grades and engagement and doing outreach to families. My husband is a teacher in the district, and he does this constantly with kids that he's not hearing from. He's sending emails, texting, calling, saying, what can we do? How can we support you? What's going on? And then if necessary, we make individual plans. And those are, again, not laid out because it depends on the circumstances of the family and what can we do and how can we get your child to engage at some level. And so now kind of we're in that next step. We know that we have about 3 to 5% of our students that we haven't been able to connect with during this time, and we continue to do outreach and try to connect with those families. But now our next step that we're continuing to do is to look at the 95 to 97% that we do have engaged in some, but maybe not all classes. And we're looking at the F list, and we used to call it the D and F list. And now we're kind of looking at that F list and saying, okay, how are kids doing compared to what they were doing in third quarter? Why are kids failing? Is it that the work is too hard? Is it that we've had no contact with them? Is it kids are making choices between doing some, I'm going to do these courses and not these courses, and then how do we kind of help them prioritize and look at that differently so that they can engage in all their classes? We're going to continue to make this conversation a priority and to look at it and study it and be reflective and solicit feedback. And we're currently developing a couple of surveys, one to students in grades 4 through 12 and one to parents about our distance learning and our future planning. So we'll be using that information as we continue to develop what this looks like and continue to refine our practice, because it's all about student learning and growth and continuing, especially because we think we're going to be in a situation that may look somewhat like this into the future. We can't just say it doesn't count. And so how do we find that balance and support kids as they continue on this learning journey?
And to jump in there, also in our future planning, as Dr. Beatson and Dr. Young alluded to earlier, we are currently working on our return to school to BUSD roadmap. And there's several different scenarios because, as you know, day by day, hour by hour, things change. So we're constantly trying to look forward to the future to try to forward think, but also respond to the feedback we're getting along the way with the students at the center of everything that we're doing. We're exploring curriculum that will work if we are in class teaching in person or in this distance learning realm. So teachers are using many different things, and we're finding kind of the best of the best now for forward thinking into next year. We're working on virtual professional learning for our teachers so that we can continue to grow in our practice and teachers can feel supported along this journey. And still working on our digital platforms such as our SIS, which is our Student Information System, Power School, and Performance Matters, our data analytics. So we're still working on that. I know we presented to you earlier in the year where we were with that. So still behind the scenes, we're working on that so we can see how that will help with all of these efforts, whether we're back in person or some hybrid or distance learning form of that. So again, we have our students at the center and the heart of all that we're doing. We greatly appreciate the teachers, and they're, like Charles said, rolling up their sleeves and diving in. I like to call it, the heart of Benicia is seen right now, and people are really in it to support our kids. So thank you. That's our distance learning update.
Thank you, Dr. Beatson and Mrs. Rice. That was really interesting and very helpful. In listening to the student comments earlier and to your presentation, it sounds like one area that students don't have much clarity is how colleges are going to address their grades in the coming out of high school. And so maybe it would be a great opportunity for our college and career services to put together a video as several of the university systems have given guidance about how they will address grades and what that will mean to students. And I think it could go a long way in alleviating that fear of, oh, I'm going to lose my spot in college, because the higher education world completely understands what's happening now in K-12, because it's also happening in higher ed. And one of the things that I think is a benefit to our current grading system is that it allows for students to have an individual opportunity to address their concerns, but also still allows them to have grades, because the systems do differentiate about what they're going to accept going into next year. And so if a campus is going to take pass-fail grades, they're fine if they have grades. They can just be translated to pass-fail. But if a campus is taking letter grades and we give pass-fail grades, they can't translate the other way, which means those courses won't count for them in their college GPA. And so we want to continue to think long-term, but I think we can alleviate some of the stressors for our seniors with some targeted information sharing from our college counseling staff about what all that means.
That's a beautiful idea. I wrote that down. I love that.
Great, thank you.
And I just have a couple of questions just for clarification. So sounds like, the teachers are doing an excellent job with providing work for the students. During the discussions, as we were kind of, we've been in it for a minute with the distance learning, has there been conversations about, the time that is having to be spent on providing the lessons, and then the time that maybe is anticipated that the students have to spend on lessons? Was any of that discussion kind of had in terms of trying to keep a balance?
Sure. Well, we put out, am I still on?
Yes.
You're on.
We put in our distance learning plan, which, by the way, is on our website. So we emailed it to everyone. It went out on social media, but it is also on our website I think it's under the COVID. Hold on, I just found out where it is. Under the distance learning board update, it's on our COVID page. So if people want to revisit that. But back to your question. Now, can you repeat your question?
Oh, it was just about the time anticipated.
Oh, yes.
So the time for preparing lessons, and then also how much time are we are kids having to spend in terms of lessons?
Excellent question. So in the distance learning plan, we have recommended amounts of time by grade level that kids should be spending on schoolwork, and it starts. I think the high school has the most, which is 3 hours per subject per week, which comes out to, if they have 6 classes, 18 hours. So that's about how much time they should be spending. Some spend a little more, some spend a little less. It's interesting. I had a conversation with my son, who is a middle school student today, and I asked him, how much time do you think you spend per day? And he said, 2 to 3 hours. And I said, do you feel like, and he said, yeah, that feels about right. And that's not 100% focused. It's, I got to go get the dog and I got to go get a snack. And so it's really trying to quantify that focused time. So we did map that out for parents, and that if it's taking them a lot longer, they should contact their child's teacher, because we know that anytime you put out a metric like that, for some students it's going to take them longer, and for some students they might be done in half an hour, because kids learn differently. And so that's just where it goes back to stay in conversation, stay in partnership with us, and we'll figure out how to make it work.
Okay, and then another question that I had was around, what was my other question? Now I can't even think of what it was. Oh, I know what it was. So the students that we haven't heard from, or it's been difficult to reach them, do we know, do they have devices? Do we know, their abilities? Because I know for some students, they're probably a little bit more technically savvy than others. Do we know if there's any challenges that students are facing with trying to navigate with technology and, accessing their assignments, turning it in, and that type of thing?
Yep, great question. So we've put out a couple surveys about who needs technology. Our principals have also done a lot of calling. They've delivered some devices to kids. We have a help desk, not a help desk, but a help email where our IT is monitoring that. And I know that teachers are doing first line of defense in trying to problem solve with kids as well, kids and families. We also have a FAQ on how to do some troubleshooting at home for parents that we've sent out.
Okay.
If we absolutely haven't heard from them, then my answer to that would be no. Like if we have not, through all of our outreach, been able to get any kind of return call back, then I don't know if they have what they need, because we haven't been able to communicate with them. But I wanted to, you had also asked about teachers and prep. And so one of the things that we did when we were in the phase, I think it was phase 2, really sort of starting to plan for the end of the year, was we said that teachers and students could plan on Monday through Thursday having that interaction time, office hours, new content. Friday, it might happen a little, but teachers are going to use that time to continue to collaborate, because we want to try to promote as much consistency as possible, and plan and grade and provide feedback, and to phone call parents and do that work. So that work primarily happens on Friday. Staffs are also having their staff meetings on Friday, trying to pull everybody together. How's everyone doing? Because we also know that our staff, they're working super hard, and they also, like both Stephanie and I have, we have our kids at home as well that I'm running out to check in on, and making sure that, I remember to make sure they ate lunch, or all of those things that other families are doing. And so that was a way to help support teachers in creating and learning all new ways to deliver instruction, is to give them some of that time on Fridays.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Oh, Leslie, you and Stephanie both did an amazing job today, and you answered a lot of the questions that we have been wondering about with the program. But can you also, one of the questions I had was the college position. So I think Stacy took care of that for us, and I think that's a great way to get that information out, because a lot of them are concerned about that, and I get it. I mean, they're getting ready to move on, so it's like, what do I do next? So. But I'm also kind of curious too. You made a little mention of it, is the Fs, in fact, that students are getting, and how that
say the Fs,
the F grade, how that's comparing to the third quarter, and I just think the overall impact of those grades will, as we begin to move forward and we begin to close out the year. Where we are with those, and you're saying 95 to 97% engagement, and that's high. That's pretty awesome when you consider that there's classrooms all over this town, and hopefully they're all in town, and some of them may be visiting elsewhere. So I was pleased to hear that. I wasn't expecting it to be quite so high, so that was good.
And that's engaged at, I just want to be really clear, that's engaged at some level. It doesn't mean that so at the elementary that's easier because there are one teacher, right, and the students. At the secondary, those are students that are engaged, but they may not be engaged in every single class. Those are the 3 to 5% of the students those are kids who we're not hearing from at all. And then back to your other question about the F list, it's something we're studying, and I've started to make a chart, and it's work that I'm going to work with the principals on next week, is to really start to look at who are those students. Are they working at the same, are they on par with where they were third quarter? What is the reason? Is it that they, and so I quite honestly, some of the feedback that we're getting when we're calling families is, my student is 17 or 18, they don't want to do the work, I can't make them. And so, or they've chosen to do some work in these classes, but not in these classes. And so we're trying to find that balance. And so we're trying to find out, is it because they're struggling with the work itself, or there's some just kids are done and they don't want to do this anymore. And I get it, it's hard, it's not necessarily always fun to do it in this kind of environment, but we're trying to pinpoint exactly what it is, and then what can we do to mitigate that.
Okay, so there are some things I would appreciate having you guys come back to us as a board and hearing about. I think the grades are one. I think the story, the connection with the college, and I certainly am very interested in your survey results, well, so that we can talk about where to go next. You know, we are a learning organization, and part of, I think, what all of us at the center of our hearts are the fact that we want to continue to learn and continue to get better so that we are, in fact, better meeting the needs of our students, because that is what we're about. So I think talking about the short and long-term goals as we go through this is something that's really important. I think to me, the grades and how the kids are accepting the work now is the short-term goal, and the long-term goal is, are we really going to start school this way again in the fall? That's a whole nother story. So
one of the long-term goals in my mind is, can we really help set them up for next year and getting those learning essentials? Right. Even though it might be more difficult for some students than others, it's really keeping that long-term picture in mind that you have to continue.
You have to.
Right. And it's not, and somebody mentioned earlier, we can't just stop. We can't say third quarter is the end, because it's not, and we may be doing this again. If not in August, then maybe October or what have you. So we have to learn how to do it and how to do it together.
And I think, and how to make it meaningful for kids, because we can't create our own gaps as these kids are coming back in the fall to the next grade level. I think that's the piece that I'm kind of holding on to and concerned about, because we've got them everywhere. And, you know, okay, teacher, you've got 30 kids now, and they've got 30 kids that have had 30 different teachers because they're all home.
Right.
So,
and I think, sorry.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. And this is probably not even, I'm just curious, and like previously we've offered like summer sessions for students. So do you think that there might be a possibility, you know, with distance learning, also maybe some component for students to be able to kind of, you know, get some extra help if they need to, or as a possibility?
Yeah, well, that's sort of a two-part answer for me. One is we've always done a secondary summer school for credit recovery. We use Odyssey, we're an online program. We're anticipating maybe needing to increase that this summer. So we're investigating what that would look like. And we've had a lot of conversation about what would there be a benefit to do targeted, very focused, like an intensive summer academy type of thing, and maybe even just at particular grade levels for particular skills, without knowing if we can do that in person or in small group, or if it would have to be online. I don't know if doing more online for kids who are already struggling is going to really close that gap. And so that's where we're sort of investigating what would it look like. So if I have a first grader or a second grader who's really struggling with reading, and that's to me one of those critical things, right, is that early reading. I don't know if doing more online intensive instruction is going to help them, or if we'd be better off saving our resources, and when we can start pulling some small in-group, just kind of do that. I did want to also comment on Stacy, you talked about the college and career readiness for seniors. I'm also thinking about our underclass.
Yes.
Because hopefully this won't go on forever for them when they're seniors, but as juniors, you start really looking at colleges. And so I'm not only thinking about our seniors, that many of them whom have been accepted, but the kids who will start to be applying, and what does it look like on their transcripts, and how long is that historical knowledge, maybe, I don't know if that's the right word for it, that colleges will start to remember that even though my child is a freshman and they had something different on their transcript, how does that play up in 4 years when they go to apply for college?
Well, again, I think it would be a really good targeted review for students if they're concerned about it at that level, because colleges, well, particularly, I can't speak for beyond California, but the CSUs and the UCs have given guidance about, test, a
SAT.
SATs and AP will not count for the next 2 years or 3 years, depending on which system it is. And so they have given long-term guidance. And I think sharing some of that, particularly as you mentioned, our juniors, sharing some of that, particularly with our juniors, will be very helpful to them because they need to know all SAT testing is going to be online for the next year and 2 years. That it's all going to be online, that it's also not going to be required by most of the major systems, and it can only benefit you, not hurt you.
Right.
And so there's lots of guidance that is already rolling out. One of the things that the guidance has not come out yet is what the formula for counting grades will be, which is why I was referring to earlier. For long-term purposes for college students, potential college students, having grades gives them more options. Because we may say here in California, we're going to accept credit, no credit, or third quarter grades, or what have you. But we have many, many students that go to Nevada and Oregon, and their schools may have a completely different approach. So grades provides our students the most flexibility in how and where they can apply in the future.
Great.
I had one comment I think I mentioned earlier when I sent out a clarifying document because the governor was reflecting on when can schools open, and his criteria for saying could we open earlier was to make up for learning loss. I really thought about that because it fit into what we're trying mightily to do, which to minimize the learning loss and to keep it going as much as possible, so we don't have to, think about starting school in July if we didn't have to. So, just a thought about how we keep the system going.
Charles, one request I wanted to make publicly that we talked about briefly in closed session is that we'd like to have a sooner board meeting to continue this discussion than the 28th, and so I know you and your team are going to work on some dates and some options for us. But I did hear one of the comments say, not wanting to keep waiting for answers. And so we'd like to address some of these issues sooner rather than wait 3 weeks before we come back together.
We'll get that scheduled. Okay.
Did I understand correctly? The surveys are going out by the end of the week, by Monday?
I would say either tomorrow or Monday, yes. We're just finalizing.
Should be able to have a study board session, Charles.
We'll put that out tomorrow or early next week. Try to get a reasonable turnaround on it and get a good response rate, so we have enough body of data that would be informative to us. And then during the week, we'll take a look at board meeting scheduled dates and make some selections about getting that out, getting that scheduled.
And I don't know what changes would look like right now, but I will say this, and Mark, you also are in another school district, as is Dr. Moss, but the other district I worked in, we have a much more flexible policy than the district where I worked before regarding grades. Mark, I don't know what yours was like, or Yosemite, how rigid they were, but I actually went through and I read ours again today. The question is how well we're utilizing it, because it does have a lot of flexibility.
One comment on that, Ms. Ferrucci, is in having lots of conversations with teachers. In the beginning, when we started this, we wanted to maximize, emphasize the teacher professionalism, because they're the professionals with the kids in the classroom. And so and over the last several weeks, and having conversations with the teachers, how much they appreciate that, the professionalism to make the right decisions on behalf of their kids. So appreciate that.
Yeah, and then we did have, we had conversations, but we were able to really work it out to the point where it's, using the third quarter grades not to go any lower, and then the students could of course achieve and do better, But we were able to work it out so that we got it done pretty quickly too, so that we were able to communicate everything out, so that our parents knew and all of our other, staff, members knew that. But in terms of how we communicate that to students, our expectations are still very high, in terms of them achieving. So it wasn't, it was just I thought it was very, very thoughtfully done. So we were able to work it out.
Well, and I guess it's part of what I personally would like to have a conversation about. Failing grades concern me, especially in challenging times. So that's
I'd be interested to see. I'd be interested to see though how many kids are failing now that were not failing when they were in school. Because from what I'm hearing, most of the kids that are not making it now are the kids that weren't doing it anyway. So those are the ones I would focus on, are the ones that were doing great, and then suddenly we go to distance learning and they fall off the side of the table. I mean, if you were not doing work during the regular school year and you're not doing work now, I mean, there's no great shock there.
Well, and that's why I'd like the comparison of third and fourth quarter mark. That's exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, interestingly, it seems like we have two groups that we're continuing to comment on. We have the students that we're concerned are failing when they weren't before, and addressing that concept of who's actually failing and where and how often. And then we have our kids that are at the top tier that are really worried about the impact on their grades and going to college.
Right.
So it seems like if we can, if we hear any more in our surveys about other pockets of concern, I'd like to hear more about that when the surveys come back.
Good call.
But the two recognizable groups that we're hearing from or we're concerned about, I think are on our radar, but maybe our surveys will identify any other issues. Thank you very much for all the information. It's very helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well done.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, but don't go away.
Nope.
Okay, Dr. Beatson. Actually, next is the strategic plan and the LCAP update.
All righty. Okay, let me do this. Oops. Stephanie, you always do this so eloquently, and I always struggle sharing my screen. Here we go. Okay, so I wanted to bring you up to date because there's been some changes in the requirements for the strategic plan LCAP, which I would typically be bringing you for a public hearing at our next board meeting in May, and then for approval in June. But those requirements have changed, and so I want to kind of let you know what is new and what is different. And then my other intention for tonight was to highlight some of the information from what we had drafted as our original LCAP for 2020 to 2023. I'm going to let you know that if it's okay with you, I probably won't spend much time there, because with the changes in the requirements and with the fluctuating and ever new information we're getting on budget, I don't know that much of this will be relevant as it stands and as it's packaged right now. And so I'd rather bring that back to you when we know a little bit more. Whoops. So what's new with LCAP? The LCAP adoption has been extended until December 15th, 2020. So we'll bring you a new document at that time in the fall. My understanding is they're going to peel off a one-year LCAP for 2020 to 2021 with possibly a new template that I would bring to you in the fall. There will be some level of stakeholder engagement, but that may be modified because of our short time window. And then they're going to probably create another template, that's a possibility, to create a 2021 to a 2024 3-year LCAP. With I think the intention behind that is hopefully by then we can sort of get back to some normalcy and have some of those original goals that we had set up, but that it would give us next year to really work on and off of what are the needs that we see coming out of distance learning or continuing distance learning, depending on what the fall looks like. The annual update, which is always part of that, will come to you in December as well. And that's basically what did we say we were going to do this year and what did we actually do. I also have heard, though I haven't seen yet, that there are 2 components that still need to be done and approved by July 1, and that is the federal addendum. And that is a document that basically links how we get our federal money, which is our Title I money, to the LCAP. I'm unsure how that's going to look if we're not having a new LCAP, but I'm told that we still have to do that component. And then the local indicators, and that's the section on the dashboard that, remember how there's 8 priorities that the state puts out, and some of them are the state metrics and all of those, graduation rates and chronic absenteeism. And then there are some that are local indicators. So we give ourselves a local assessment. Those will still be required, I believe, this spring. And so I will bring you more information, Shell, if that becomes apparent. But what I will bring you in June, because it needs to be approved by you by July 1, is a new report, and it's called the COVID-19 Operations Written Report. It is a one board meeting approval, so we don't need to do a public hearing on this. And then we submit it to the county. The county doesn't have to approve it, and my understanding is it doesn't even go to the state. But it is a narrative form that has 5 questions that have to do with how are we continuing to deliver high quality distance learning opportunities for students? How do we continue to provide meal services for students? What steps have we taken? So there's 5 questions that we write a narrative response to that basically tells the story of how we've continued through school closure. And so I will prepare that, and I've sent it out to some of our staff and parents on our LCAP working advisory committee to get some feedback, and I will bring that to you for approval in June. And then the rest of the slides on here, I don't know that it's worth really going through at this point, because it was based on, when we put this together, it was based on the fact that we still thought we were going to have an LCAP that might look similar, and I don't know how similar it's going to be. So I don't want to spend a lot of time, if it's okay with you, going through things that may change based on student needs and budget scenarios. So after that, that's the end of my report, because it was really about these changes.
All right. Thank you very much. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you.
We are still in the discussion section of our agenda. Okay, so we are actually moving into our non-consent action items, and there are none, so we are done with our agenda. But I would like to just recap real quickly. Dr. Young, you are going to work with staff and identify at least 2 study sessions, board meetings for us, so that we can go into depth regarding the surveys and the grading and the status of our students, and then also the status of the funding.
Yeah, and then also we've just from a planning standpoint, study sessions regarding what next year might look like.
Yes.
Beginning, we have a lot of. I like how Ms. Rice said that, like the roadmap for next year, what that's going to look like for us and our kids and staff, and families.
Okay, so we're going to look forward to a few dates from you.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that said, I want to thank everybody for hanging in there. There was a lot of information tonight and a lot to be discussing. So our board meeting is adjourned. And again, I just want to say thank you, staff and teachers, for our great appreciation week for amazing people. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
We're adjourned.